Welcome to Rates and Barrels. It's Friday, October 4th. Derek VanRiper, Eno Sarris here with you. On this episode, we discuss the fourth and final team advancing through the wild card round, the Mets, doing it in thrilling fashion against the Brewers. We'll talk about all four division series matchups. All four of those series get underway on Saturday. So tons of baseball lined up for Saturday. We'll talk about some of the quirks of the schedule that might lead to a few opportunities for teams with extra off days during the upcoming round as well. Time permitting, we'll take a look at what's next for the Brewers as well. A lot to cover with those four series. So if that doesn't happen today, it will happen on an upcoming episode. And before we get started, just a quick announcement you may have seen on Twitter from last weekend. Our good friend Trevor May and his wife welcomed their son into the world last weekend. Baby mom and dad are doing great. If you've followed Trevor on Twitter, you've seen they've already started watching baseball. And in that young man's life, he's seen some pretty exciting games already.
Congrats to Trevor. I'm sure baseball will be a big part of his child's life.
Seems inevitable, right? That's kind of just the way that it goes. Now, things have been a little rough in the VanRiper household in the last 14 hours or so, and it's mostly courtesy of Pete Alonso. As you can see, the Mets did it again, another massive we factor. The Brewers getting everything they wanted as far as having a lead in the ninth inning, a 2-run lead at home with Devin Williams entering the game, but top of the order for the Mets came through. I think this is one of those situations where it's like, how beyond the Alonso home run itself, which had a momentary tease for a lot of Brewers fans out there, because as that ball was on its way out, there was the shot where you could see Sal Frelick tracking back. And if you're a Brewers fan who's watched this team the last several years, you've seen a ton of great catches, pulling back home runs. Frelick's had some, Blake Perkins has had them, Lorenzo Cain's had some. And you thought for just a fleeting split second that maybe Frelick was going to do something amazing and pull it back. But then you realized, nope, that wasn't going to be a catchable ball. And in fact, it was going to send the Mets into the NLDS. But it feels to me like the moment where it started to unravel was being ahead of Francisco Lindor 1-2 and not having the fastball command to finish off that sequence, right? I know there's a tipping video that John Boy put out there. So that's part of the equation too. You have an elite closer with two very good pitches, but when he loses one, that could make him predictable. And if he was giving something away, then that's curtains. That's going to do it against a high quality top of the lineup like the Mets had.
Yeah, and in terms of location, if you look at the very few homers that have ever been hit off of his crazy pitch, the airbender, they're all high in the zone. And that wasn't, I mean, not like, I'm not saying high, like, top third. I'm just saying like, not kind of falling off the table. And
right. Not in the lower third of the zone, and not necessarily the middle third, but the kind of space between the middle third and the lower third, right? Like that line. And we know Pete Alonso's a great low ball hitter too. So that's another little wrinkle that you're kind of worried about watching that matchup.
7 homers, and he in 2,395.
Yep. Sure.
The airbender's thrown 7 homers, a .066 ISO. So it doesn't happen often. I do think that Alonso in some ways is uniquely suited for that homer because it takes really top end power to go oppo. And he has that top end power. And what that allowed him to do was wait on it. And he basically waited on the change. So maybe he was tipped off to it, or maybe he just thought, this is probably the change. I'm going to wait on it. If it's the fastball, maybe I can still, drag my bat through real quick and foul it off. But he was thinking oppo. He thinks oppo. He was one of the few people that won the home run derby hitting opposite field homers. So that was lined up for his strengths. There's a lot of made of, he was pretty poor down the stretch. And I even saw a little hype video where they put together, the foibles of, the last couple weeks of Pete Alonso as a Met. And, even Boo Shambi, every time he stepped to the plate late in that game, was, this might be the last time Pete Alonso, takes a swing as a Met. And And he did. I played around with the game log, and I think people do this a lot actually, because there's people emphasizing how many plate appearances he hit his last homer, which means you're just moving the game log along to find it. But I think I found it, and the last 37 plate appearances of the regular season, he did not homer. He hit 133 and 297, 133 slugging, and had a 46 WRC plus. And earlier in that game, even there was a foul out that he should have caught that he didn't. And this all ends up on the highlight reel to emphasize how he turned things around. But I don't know, man. Like, I think a lot of this stuff is overstated. Like, oh, he was so bad in September. Well, yeah, I mean, he hit 222, but he had a 111 WRC plus and was still a better than league average because he walks so much and he still hits homers. So I just think that's part of the package with Alonso, and that's why you keep him where you do in the heart of that lineup, because he can either walk or hit a blast for you. And so I don't know. I don't think it was so disastrous of an ending. It was going to be so disastrous of an ending for him with the Mets, and I think they might even bring him back because they've got the money and he's generally well liked. I wonder if that homer, changes anything about the re-signing.
Who knows? That homer might have been worth $40 million to Pete Alonso or something. I don't know. I mean, I think it's one of those moments that Mets fans are going to remember forever. I think Brewers fans are going to try and forget it forever. And it's going to be on baseball highlight reels for a long time.
It was the best win. He's a 40-year-old Mets fan. He said it was the best win he'd seen. I immediately went back to the Robin Ventura grand slam walk-off single that I thought won the series, but it just won a game in a series, And I was thinking of Endy Chavez had had a big catch for them, and I was thinking of that game. So it's like they didn't even win that game. I was like, God damn, my memory's so bad. I was so sure that Barry Bonds hit 2 walk-off homers against the Braves in 2002. Not even one.
Well, I'm gifted with a better memory than you, but the way my memory works is I just repress one previous bad memory to make room for a new one. And I gotta say, I appreciate Mike Farron from MLB Network Radio pointing out just how rough this recent postseason stretch has been for the Brewers. The various moments of heartbreak, losing Game 7 at home in the NLCS, the Dodgers several years ago.
That came back now that you're
the Chris Taylor made just an unbelievable diving catch, and I hadn't thought about it in 4 years. Because I hadn't thought about it in 4 years because of the Juan Soto hit off of Hader that had that funky spin on it that Trent Grisham misplayed in right field against the Nats.
Grisham, yeah, the ball up the middle that then he got traded.
Yeah, that was his last game as a Brewer. And then what happens is people remind me of these moments and I rewatch them and then they all just come flooding back. And it's brutal, just brutal. But, it's tough. It's tough. It's tough to think that you're going to do it and then have it be taken away, right? I think that's the hardest part of a loss like that. It felt like everything late was falling exactly into place for Brewers fans, only to lose it in a heartbreaking sort of fashion.
Especially after Game 2 with the Chourio homers. And I mean, it's just like, this is Chourio ascendant. Here we go.
This is it. This time we're going to break through. And there's some other implications to this as well. We'll save those for a bit later in the show.
One thing that's so fun about the Brewers, I think, is a little different than the past, is that I don't know. In some ways, I think, I don't want to overstate this, and maybe just prove me wrong with one example, but is Jackson Chourio is like one of the most special young prospects to come through.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're thinking about modern Brewers history, you're comping him to Ryan Braun at every turn, right? Like, how does he compare to Ryan Braun, the excitement of Braun, and how good Braun was right away? And I think that's a fair comparison to make. And then I think for the next generation, it's
a little bit more dynamic on the base pass and with the glove, probably.
Yeah, I think it's maybe more like comps to Robin Yount, right? Like within the franchise, special player that could be here for a long time and could be part of a winning core. Absolutely, like all of that's true. I guess we'll get this part out of the way. I think the thing that hit me a little harder than the loss itself was listening to some of the sign-offs and post-game interviews, because Bob Uecker's been a part of Brewers baseball forever, right? Like his stories, his voice. If you're a Brewers fan, like you have memories attached to Uecker calling games that will last a lifetime. Every year this has happened, you've got the sense like maybe Uke's not coming back next year, and he's so far come back. But the post-game comments made by Christian Yelich, and just you could see it in his eyes. His eyes were kind of red. He had talked to Uecker before the media came to interview him at his locker. And then Jeff Levering's sign-off, who works between the radio and TV booth for the Brewers, also, you could feel the emotion on his voice was more than just the loss of the game. I think I get the impression that maybe Uke told some people that might be his last game. He hasn't announced it as such, but the weight of that, I think, is hitting people around here a little harder too, because I think a lot of us have believed, like, one, Bob Uecker will live forever and call Brewers games forever, even though the reality is that won't be the case. And then two, that they would win one before Uke was out of that booth, right? Like that was always kind of the belief with this current core, this group that keeps going back to the postseason every year. So I think that's the extra dagger part for fans who have been part of this team for so long and have thought like they keep getting closer. Maybe this year's a little bit different. Unfortunately, this year just isn't. But hopefully those feelings will fade, and hopefully Uke will have a change of heart if he hasn't made his decision yet and stick around. But you just got a vibe that something was a little bit different about the way things played out in Milwaukee on Thursday.
The way the roster looks, I feel like, if they could convince him to stay next year, there's some things that happens to the roster after next year. Like they lose Devin Williams. There's Freddie Peralta has one more year. They're losing Willie Adames this offseason. I don't know. I feel like Christian coming back next year. I think Rhys Hoskins going to pick up that $18 million option.
I think he will. I mean, it was a relative down year for Hoskins, and he did a lot of the things he ordinarily does, like low average power, just more of a league average than above average contributor. I think the open market probably wouldn't give him more than what that second year is worth. There's a chance he's better next year, right? I mean, within the range of what we've seen from him in the past, not like bouncing back to superstar levels. The Willie Adames question is probably the biggest one as far as how the roster goes. I think a lot of people around here wonder if Devin Williams gets traded before he's a free agent, because as a team that runs a pretty tight payroll, having a closer in the final year of arbitration is not necessarily something that they're prone to do. So there's a few things like that.
And if there was an infielder, especially maybe instead of, I think Joey Ortiz can play short.
Terang can too.
And Terang can. So if there was a second or third baseman that they could have for a couple years, I just don't. What about like Jake Berger? But then, what do the Marlins need with Devin Williams? Yeah, I don't know what it is, but they could do something like that for sure. I'd be really interested to see what Brandon Woodruff has coming back next year. Because they'll have Woodruff, Savali, and Peralta next year already under contract.
And you got Mizorowski coming through.
Mizorowski coming up, so there's some interesting stuff coming up. They're in pretty good shape, and I think that they will have like $20 to $30 million to spend. So they could get a back end starter, maybe even sign a reliever that they find undervalued and trade Devin Williams at the same time. They should be at least as good as they were this year, I think, with the right moves.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can be a little more optimistic from 24 to 25 than you were from 23 to 24, because the way last offseason started, we're like 11 months removed from flying back from first pitch Arizona. My plane landing to the news that Craig Counsell was going to the Cubs, and then a few months later, the Corbin Burns trade, which people saw coming. But I think when it actually happened, you're sitting there and you're like, oh, this is brutal. Like they're not going to be the same team this year. New manager, no ace. it's going to be a rebuilding year. And it was in the predictions, and most places had the Brewers 4th or 5th in the NL Central, and they exceeded just about any projection imaginable. So like when you pull back and look at that as a fan, you're like, oh, okay, that was actually a pretty good year. The way it ended was just such a gut punch that it makes you forget about how pleasantly surprised you were for the better part of the last 6 months. Here's an interesting tidbit, though, as we get into our division series previews. The Brewers, this is from Tyler Kepner's column today. Brewers fans are already acutely aware of this. Tyler Kepner wrote about this in The Athletic. Every time the Brewers have fallen short of the World Series, the team that knocked them out has made it. This goes back to the 81 Yankees, the 2008 Phillies, the 2011 Cardinals, the 2018 Dodgers, who I mentioned, 1-7 in Milwaukee in the NLCS, the 2019 Nationals with that sliced ball out to Grisham, the 2020 Dodgers in the short series, the 21 Braves, and the 23 Diamondbacks.
That's crazy.
So that
they
is
all made the World
nuts.
Series and most of them won it?
Yeah.
Like at least half of them won it.
A bunch of those teams actually also won.
Jesus,
a few of them.
Weird.
Yeah.
That's just weird. That's coincidence.
It's very strange coincidence. It's like the negative version of how good the Royals are in postseason series. It's like the opposite. like the luck of the two franchises needs to balance
even out on some level,
just a little bit.
Because I would say, like, this Mets-Phillies series, like I can't even believe they played to a virtual standstill in the regular season with a 7-6 record for the Phillies, because I see air superiority here for the Phillies.
Really,
in terms of like arms. Like, come on. Like, they're coming at you with Zach Wheeler, who like either will win the Cy Young or be second in it. Mm-hmm. Aaron Nola, who had like a 2 ERA in the postseason last year, and maybe he won't again, but he's a credible starting pitcher that's probably better than anyone that the Mets have. Yeah, Aaron Nola's better than anyone they got, and so
even in his. We've talked about Nola as a frontline guy that has like the widest range of outcomes, maybe of any frontline. Yeah. If you put him in the frontline guy group, which I think we do on this show pretty consistently, he has higher highs and lower lows than you'd expect for someone that gets into that bucket. I would agree with you. You would take him over Severino. You'd take him over Minaya. You'd take him over McGill. Like anybody the Mets would throw out there, you'd say Nola and the Phillies would be favored in that starting pitching matchup.
I think you have to get all the way to Ranger Suarez before you take a Met maybe over a Philly starter. I'd take Christopher Sanchez, I think, over every starter.
I was just going to say, like, when you get all the way to Rangers, you have Christopher Sanchez ahead of Ranger now, and you think Christopher Sanchez would even have at least a slight edge over any of those Met starters?
Yeah. I might. I don't know. I should know. What is the schedule for this? Because you could play some games with Ranger Suarez and Christopher Sanchez, depending on the schedule. Because you would probably want to use the bullpen a little bit more on those days. You would consider that maybe Wheeler and Nola would go deeper. So you might do something where you're like, Wheeler, Christopher Sanchez, Nola, Ranger, just to like maybe give your bullpen more days off. Okay, now we go to the bullpen. Okay, maybe I take Edwin Diaz over any reliever the Phillies have as a single reliever.
Yeah, I mean, even again, another guy that falls into the top tier at his,
but has some
position,
variance. I mean,
has a little more variance. Has just been that way his whole career. I mean, it's some of it's the free passes,
command, I think.
Yeah.
So then behind him, I take every Philly over the other Mets. Like I go like 4 or 5 deep with the Phillies before I say, okay, maybe I take Greene Garrett here. You know what I mean? So I see this Phillies pitching staff as vastly superior, and I think that the lineups are a pick'em.
The lineups are they're both very good.
Played to a pick'em, but I would, with the names on the back of the jerseys and the players and stuff, like I think I would pick the Phillies. The Mets were like slightly better once you park adjust, but I think I'd take the Phillies lineup if you made me decide.
Yeah, but it's close. It's extremely close. That was borne out over the full 162, right? I mean, the Mets had a 109 WRC plus. The Phillies had a 108. The Phillies, I think, had a few more injuries in their position player group that probably justify that tiny difference. You start thinking about some of the secondary guys, Bohm and Real Muto. Maybe you give them a slight edge over the Mets secondary options in their lineup. But again, extremely close from that perspective. The edge is pitching for sure. The schedule in this series is not at all like we have on the AL side. So it's Saturday, Sunday for games 1 and 2, Tuesday, Wednesday after the travel day for 3 and 4, and then a game 5 would be on Friday. So a very traditional schedule here, which I think also favors the team that just has flat out better pitching. I think when you have more breaks, we'll talk about this for the ALDS
you can
series,
get by with fewer pitchers.
You can use fewer pitchers, right? You just keep that list shorter. You can push guys beyond 1 inning if you want to, and you have a built-in rest day between games 1 and 2. So I think that would have been something that would have made things even better for the Mets and the way they operate if they were on the AL schedule. It doesn't mean this is insurmountable whatsoever. I mean, this is going to be a good series. I thought my original prediction was the Brewers over the Mets and then the Phillies winning this series. I'm not going to change it, even though I know I'm flying right against the face of history that I just pointed out a little while ago from the Tyler Kepner column. But I think the difference comes down to the pitching. And I think it's not just the starting pitching. I think what the Phillies have done very well over the last few years is they have taken the command concerns in their bullpen and they've slowly whittled those away, right? And the confidence I have in the Phillies bullpen today versus like 3 years ago is quite a bit higher. And I hope for the sake of Phillies fans out there, it's higher too. But is this going to be an awesome series? Yeah, I think it is. I think it's going to go at least 6 games, or it's going to go at least 4 very tight games. I wish we had 7 for this one because I think it would be epic. But I think it could be epic even as a 5-game series.
Yeah, the Phillies. This is funny. The median location plus for relievers is not 100. It's 99, which makes sense, right?
Yeah,
think
tick
about
below. Yeah,
why guys end up there. But the Phillies for the season with their whole bullpen had the 14th best location plus. That's better than they've been in the past. The Mets actually had the worst location plus, which probably dragged down a little bit by Diaz and some people. So that could be part of what happens. You know, Diaz walks a couple guys and then Bryce Harper steps to the plate. You know what I mean? Like it's this in this kind of a series. Also, I want to point out Tyler Kepner's great column about the history of the Phillies and the Mets. Just a really long one with fun little bits. Guys who've been traded from each to each. And then the one that I remember the most vividly is the time that the Phillies came back and beat the Mets when they were 7 down with 17 to play.
Mm-hmm.
That was an epic collapse, and the Mets would like to pay that one back if they could. But, again, not the longest of series. I think that the research suggests that we would have to play, 70-game series to really figure these things out. So.
Oh, that's just 70? I mean, that's all we need for this to actually work.
I mean, there have been, like, I think Bill James had a question that was like, is this a tournament that we're just cool with like a bunch of randomness, or is this like supposed to crown the best team and we should make it so that, the best teams have the best chance at winning it? And I was like, if we want the best team to win, we should cancel the regular season and just have like 50-game tournament, like 50-game series.
I'd flip it around. I'd say turn baseball into the Premier League, where it's just the regular season and that's it. And then if you want to have a World Series, then it's all of October. It's the same 2 teams. The best team in the AL plays the best team in the NL for a month. That's the only.
That'd be kind of fun.
162 to get into the World Series, and then like best of 31 in October to win it.
And Dodgers for a month.
The ratings on that would be incredible.
You think so? I mean, that particular one, maybe.
2,425 Cologuard
right.
commercials. Rob Manfred is absolutely giddy about that possibility. Do you understand how excited they are about
the
this?
Best record in the AL. I think that's absolutely right in a different way, which I would say we should crown a regular season winner. and call the tournament, call the postseason a tournament. The something cup, the Manfred Cup.
No, don't name anything after Rob Manfred. No one wants the Manfred Cup. The President's Trophy in the NHL. Okay, so just a sidebar for 1 second. Like, I'm a really big hockey fan for a long time, and being in the market.
They have names for their trophies, right?
They have the President's Trophy is the one you get for having the most points in the regular season. As a Red Wings fan, they had a lot of President's Trophies for a little while, and a lot of disappointment in the playoffs. And I can tell you firsthand, as a fan of a team that was in that, like, great in the regular season, getting upset in the playoffs mode.
You got President's Cups and not Stanley Cups.
Well, and they got Stanley Cups too. I mean, they won, I think, 4 cups in about 15 years. So they had their run, but the level of, like, I want to win every year that I had as a hockey fan was off the charts. Like, I mean, part of it was my age at the time. All I'm saying is, those regular season trophies,
the Brewers are karmic payback for all that.
Karmic payback. Yes, they absolutely are. They really are. I mean, there's no other way around it. The other kind of X factor for this series, though, that we haven't seen yet in the postseason could be Kodai Senga, right? So Kodai Senga might be available in some kind of relief role once the official rosters are set for the series. Then we'll have a better idea of what that might look like. But even if he's only available for 4, 5, 6 outs at a time because he's not fully stretched out for this series, that would be a nice lift, a nice glue guy that they'd have at the disposal of Carlos Mendoza for this series.
Yeah. I think the way that it could really be important is that, you like Quintana and Manaea and Severino a lot more if you don't have to pitch them a third time through the order. I know that Quintana just came off of a good job of doing this. But watching that game, I was like, oh, he's back out there, and I was like, come on. I mean, the Brewers got to make him pay for this. Third time through the order this year, the slugging against Quintana went from 384 to 432. The OPS went from 685 to 764. And he was 15% worse than even other pitchers in that split. That split is 15% worse than others pitchers. So he's not better than people third time through the order. He's in fact worse. So, batters hit 277, 332, 432 against Quintana third time through the order. If you have Kodai Senga that can pitch, once every 2 or 3 days for 2 innings, that's a pretty good pitcher to kind of come in the 4th and get you to the 6th, or the 5th to get you to the 7th. And then that changes a lot because I don't know how far my circle of trust is in that Mets bullpen. And Senga kind of bridging the gap. It's the kind of Tigersian, Raysian, Giantsian way to, like, slay the giant. Would be like, we got this bridge pitcher, we got these other pitchers. They're going to get us through 4. He's going to get us through 2, and then we got the relievers.
I mean, I think part of the Thursday installment of Baseball is Weird is Jose Quintana giving you 6 scoreless, and then Jose Butto being the one that gives up a pair of homers, right? Because if I'm not mistaken, Jose Butto is in your circle of trust for relievers you want out there in close, late situations in this Mets bullpen, is he not?
100%, yeah.
Yeah, baseball's weird.
One thing that probably helps with this new trend, I mean, newish, whatever. Everything old is new again. I'm not saying that, oh my God, people are throwing sinkers and it's new. It's like, yeah, they used to throw sinkers. But the thing that I think that what happens is that throwing multiple fastballs can help you. I don't know if I was looking at the right splits for Quintana, but anyway, throwing multiple fastballs can help you get through the order 3 times better because you've got different ways to play with them. So.
Right. And I think the benefit of that, especially in the regular season, can be reducing wear and tear on your bullpen, because if you have middle and back end starters with multiple fastballs, they can work deeper into a start and take a little pressure off occasionally, as opposed to we have our one or two aces and clearly our two best starters, and everybody else is 4 or 5 and dive. Then you're putting a lot more strain on the pen, right? So maybe
Severino, check this out. Severino this year went from a 545 OPS first time through to an 843 third time through.
Wow.
Kodai Senga after Severino would be brilliant.
Yeah. We'll see if that actually can be an option for the Mets in this series. Sticking by my original prediction, though, I think the Phillies get through this one. Who do you see coming out of this matchup?
Phillies. And also, I think we're one series down. We got 3 more to go, so we better book it a little.
I was going to save the Brewers eulogy, man. Sorry. You started that.
I can't help looking for it. I'm a fantasy player. I can't help looking for it.
You shoved us right into it. I was like, I guess we're going. This is going to happen. Let's get to the Tigers-Guardians matchup, where we haven't talked a lot about Cleveland yet because this is their first postseason series. League average offense with more power this year, kind of getting there a different way. I think that's a good thing for them overall. Just makes them a little bit more dangerous. They've been great defensively. Second in defensive runs saved, 84, plus 10 by outs above average. If you look at the whole season, the lineup is kind of strange because you see David Fry, 129 WRC plus, and maybe the supporting cast is a little bit better. If you look at the second half, you see Jose Ramirez being a superstar, and you see a late surge from Kyle Manzardo, popped 5 homers and 69 plate appearances in the second half. And you see some situational power from Jhonkensy Noel and a little bit from David Fry. But you kind of see like Ramirez and Naylor being the 2 rocks in the lineup. And then you just wonder who else is going to step up. It's still a question. It's still a very top-heavy sort of build. Not that the Tigers don't have similar questions about what's going to happen in various pockets of their lineup as well. It's just funny to think like how recency bias steeps into our analysis, right? The Guardians were 6.5 games better than the Tigers during the regular season. They only have to be 1 game better during the next 5, and this lineup should be a little better than what the Tigers have based on what we saw over the last 162 games and what we saw in the final 30 days of the regular season. But all that is to say, like, how much do you trust this Guardians run producing unit? Because the ongoing question we had about them as a team was that they didn't have the same starting pitching quality that we'd grown accustomed to. So they either had to play phenomenal defense, which they have, hit better, or at least hit for more power, which they have, and then be phenomenal out of the bullpen, which they have. Like, does the script that they're using actually continue to work for them? Because we've been a little bit skeptical of it at most turns so far this season, even though they handled their business in the division again this year.
Yeah, I think they're so similar to the Tigers in this regard, but they're superior in some important ways, which is the bullpen is superior. And I do wonder about this. Like, take Alex Cobb, Gavin Williams against Casey Mize and Reese Olson. Which side are you taking?
Slight edge to the Guardians, but not.
Yeah, so pick them
strong edge.
Pick them in their worst. It's a pick them in their worst matchup situation, right?
Yeah.
I guess you take Skubal easily over Bibee. So you take the Guardians starting rotation over the
Tigers, but pretty narrow margin though. More narrow than
the Tigers starting rotation over the Guardians because of Skubal.
Yeah, because of Skubal, but it's more narrow than
right. Because if you go game by game, you can go, okay, well, they don't have the advantage in Skubal, and then maybe they have the advantage in the other one. So, yeah. In terms of the lineup, there's a couple things. I love Stephen Vogt. And he has his players' backs, and I wonder if there is something to Andres Jimenez being not only is he fast, but he's a veteran for this team. But I don't know why he bats second so often. He doesn't really have a split this year where he's been above average player, but yet he has among the most plate appearances on this team. And he's batted second more than any other position. And I don't know. If it's me, I'm just having Ramirez and Naylor at the top. Why don't even just start at the game with Ramirez?
Just max out those two guys right away. Right? Yeah, I mean, make sure.
Or Kwan makes a ton of contact, but you can use contact actually once somebody's on base.
Mm-hmm.
So you could, I mean, if you really want to, you could put Kwan, Ramirez, Naylor. Just try to get as many plate appearances out of your best hitters. If you do that, then 3 deep, I'm in. 4 deep, now you're talking about Lane Thomas, David Fry, Manzardo, Noel. I'll give you 4.5 deep, maybe 5 deep in this lineup, but that still leaves like four kind of easy spots in the lineup, and that's important because the fewer kind of quote unquote holes you have, I think the fewer opportunities you have for what we talked about when we were looking back at the Tigers against the Astros, and when they were like, okay, we're going to bring in Brant Herter for these 2 lefties, and we're going to leave him in and see how long we can leave him in. And what the Tigers are going to be able to do against the Guardians to some extent is, we're going to bring in a reliever for the 4th. We're going to bring in a reliever to get Manzardo out, or get Manzardo out of the game even. We're going to bring in a lefty that might even get Manzardo out of the game. And then he's going to get the easy outs. And he's going to subsist and just get through the bottom of that order. And then we bring in a new reliever when the order flips over, So they can still, the more holes you have in your lineup, the more susceptible you are to these strategies that the Tigers are going to bring to the table.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to think about it. Now, it's just as far as the Tigers lineup goes, you say the Guardians maybe 4.5 deep. Kerry Carpenter, when they're playing against a righty, he's in, and their best hitter by WRC plus. I think most of us look at Riley Greene and say he's probably their best all-around offensive player because he's in the lineup every single day.
Meadows has been amazing since he came back. A 300 hitter with a 500 slugging, a 340 OBP since he came back.
Yeah.
He's in my circle of trust. So that's your 3. Now, when I started talking about like, Colt Keith, John Cancy Noel, Manzardo, like that group, like I'm willing to give him 4 or 5 deep if you kind of Vierling, Colt Keith, that grouping I think is good enough. I wouldn't call them holes, So you got Carpenter, Meadows, Greene, Torkelson. Meadows, Greene, Carpenter is your trusted 3, and I'm going to give them 5 deep with Vierling and Keith and Torkelson in varying degrees. I mean, there's different matchups there, different handedness. I get it, but I'll say I'll give them 5, and I think they have basically 4 holes as well.
Right, and it's like the difference between Torkelson and Manzardo. I don't know if there is one right now, even though we've seen some highs and lows from Torque.
Because
right,
they're going to come up. Those Torkelson and Manzardo are going to come up with guys on with 2 outs a lot. I bet.
That's what I think is really interesting. There's almost certainly going to be a few new sort of playoff heroes from this series, from this group of position players, in part because the Tigers have a lot of guys that haven't been here before, but in part too because the depth of both lineups is filled with guys that are either mix and match platoon guys or they're just very inexperienced players, right? So I think the other question I have for you about the series, and it's not going to work this way for game 1 because it won't be Skubal versus Bibee. Tigers probably throw like Reese Olson out there, or maybe an opener and then Reese Olson as like their primary game 1 plan, and then sort of cobble it together the way they
just go
they like to do.
Mize. He threw that slider 89 last time, and Olsen.
You go Mize over Olson.
Olsen's stuff hasn't been back the same as it was pre-injury, so I would just I'm a stuffist. I would ride that like, Mize did something really interesting in his last outing. It crumbled, but it crumbled in the 5th, dude.
Mm-hmm.
If you got the first 4 innings of Mize's last outing, you take that over Olson any day. And if the Tigers being who they are, they would just take 4, and then Mize may never go back out there for the 5th. So I just trust Mize's first 4 innings over Olson's right now. So I'd go Mize. But yeah, I forget. That's not your point. You're saying,
my question is it's not Skubal versus Bibee. So it's not your ace versus their ace in game 1, which is fine. But I'm curious what you would advise Tigers hitters to do, or what you think the Tigers hitters are going to try and do game plan wise against Tanner Bibee, because I think that's the spot where there's a reasonably large edge for the Guardians because it's not Skubal going on the other side. So how could the Tigers kind of counteract that?
I was joking with an advanced scout who had a former player that had been brought into the organization above him, that was advising players, and he was rolling his eyes, and he's like, "Yeah, every hitters meeting is see it high," and so like I was like, that was in my head as I was looking, and I was like, would I advise them against Tanner Bibee is see it high because Bibee throws his fastball high and a slider low. So like see it high. If it's high, let it fly. Like go, try to hit that fastball high in the zone. It's not the specialist fastball. It has good velo, but by shape, it's not. It's pretty vanilla. It's almost dead zone. It would meaning that it's got average movement. It should be easy to sort of spot. This is the wrinkle that Bibee will throw at you, especially if you are a lefty. This is where Tanner Bibee throws his curveballs and changeups high. Mm-hmm. In the zone. So, you're either going to take your fastball swing at one of these and get a curveball or change, or you're going to let it go because you think it's bendy or it looks a little bit low and it's in the zone. So Tanner Bibee steals strikes with his curveball and changeup. And you got to know that when you step to the plate. So now you have two ideas in your head when you step to the plate, and that just makes it harder. It's not just high, let it fly. It's high, let it fly, but if you see the real ankle, better swing too.
I get the sense you don't have quite that much time to run through that.
Right, exactly.
As the pitches.
And I was looking at counts, I think I would just settle in and try to get the fastball, because as bad as Bibee's fastball is, he throws it 40% in almost every count. The only time that he drops below 40% is 2 strikes. So I think, as stupid as it sounds, I would have the most basic strategy against him, which is high fastballs and then have a 2-strike approach, which is, basically wait as long as possible and spoil things that are in the zone. Try to hit at the opposite field in the zone. Just try to make contact.
Was there anything else that you saw from the Tigers in the 2-game series against the Astros or in their run to make it into the postseason down the stretch that's kind of changed your view, opinion, or your just overall outlook for this club?
I'm not like a lineup junkie. I'm not a guy who's like, oh, if you batted this guy third or that guy's fifth, there's too much of that. I think it's too much. It's often so retroactive too. Like, oh, well, if that guy who went 3 for 4 yesterday had been batting second, you guys would have scored a bunch of runs. Yeah, well, the guy that we batted 8th instead of second was Andy Ibanez. You really want us to bat Andy Ibanez second? So I'm not really a lineup junkie like that. I to the most part, I think you just want your best hitters at the top lineup. That's all I care about. There's some research that suggests, contact is more important in some places. But for me, I'm just like, can I get more at-bats from my better players? That's something we do in Little League. It's something we've done forever. And so that's what I said. But Justin Henry Malloy was hitting second?
Against the lefty in game 1 against Framber, yeah.
I thought that was
the Tigers lineup against the lefty just looks it just looks weird, because it's like, oh wow, that they're platooning those spots and with those guys. It's a little jarring if you're not used to it.
Yeah, and I don't even really want to look at the numbers. I'm just like, I don't want Justin Henry Malloy second in my order. Like, you don't have a better right-handed hitter that you can, like, why not? Isn't Vierling right-handed?
Yeah.
Why wasn't Vierling second? Like, everyone's giving AJ Hinch credit for pushing all the right buttons, but that was the one button where I was like, I don't get why you're pushing this button right here. So and just look at San Francisco right now, where the pendulum is swinging away from analytics and, all that stuff. Is like, the pendulum can swing away from AJ Hinch if he bats Justin Henry Malloy second against the lefty. And I don't know if that they Cantillo, but is there another lefty?
Even the usage, like the usage for Cleveland might lead them to handle it differently. With Framber, he's going to be in there ideally for 3 times the order, but at least for 2. So that's probably why you make that commitment there. For the Guardians, Cantillo and Boyd, depending on how and when
they may go
used,
1 time through the order.
Yeah, so that I think that just completely changes the look of the lineups, and we're not going to see it because it's Bibee, Williams, and probably Lively. At least Bibee and Williams for the first 2, where you got righties that are supposed to go 5+ for the Guardians.
Yeah, the Guardians. One thing that I also want to point out about them that's really cool is they've got a little bit of the clock face stuff going on in terms of Emmanuel Clase's like 100-mile-an-hour cutter. Cade Smith is a more traditional fastball, power fastball from the right side, but he also has a great splitter. And they even got a guy who people haven't seen much of, Eric Sabrowski, who they picked up late in the season, who's struck out 40% of the guys he saw in the regular season, and he's like a lefty with 20 inches of IVB on his fastball, and I don't think he throws that hard. 92.7. So they've got like a crafty lefty. They've got the power righty, the cutter, the splitter, and they even have like Eli Morgan, who had a 1.93 ERA through the regular season, throws 92, but has a really great changeup. If you see something early in a game where you're like, because you saw the Tigers were really trying to go opposite field, in that one game against Framber's. If you see something like that, then maybe you could throw, they're really aggressive on Tanner Bibee's fastball. Eli, you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Goose them up with those changeups, So there's a lot of matchup ability in that reliever squad for the Guardians. So I'm picking the Guardians to go through based on the strength of the bullpen and slight superiority in the lineup. And I think Gavin Williams and Alex Cobb and Matt Boyd are going to be just enough.
Yeah, as skeptical as I've been of the Guardians at times this year, I think they could do a lot of the things the Tigers do well themselves. It's a little bit of a Spider-Man meme matchup, so I'm going to stick with the Guardians here. As I want to believe in the Tigers. I want to jump on that bandwagon, and hopefully for Tigers fans, it keeps on going. But I think the Guardians can take care of business in this series. Let's go over to the Royals and Yankees. Definitely not a matchup I thought I was going to see in the postseason back when the season began. This Royals team, though, got it done in Baltimore in their 2-game series. It's a little different going a little further. This is another situation where you have a lot of off days built in, right? So you go, I think, Saturday for game 1, Monday for game 2, a travel day before you play Wednesday. You have a Thursday game right after the Wednesday game, and then Saturday for game 5. So what that would mean is that Cole Reagans can start 2 games in this series on regular rest. Cole Reagans can start game 2 and a potential game 5 for the Royals, which is very good news. But we kind of hinted at this earlier. For the Royals, I think one of the questions we have is how many relievers are in their circle of trust, and the answer is probably around 3 or 4. That leads perfectly into like the schedule. Like that's exactly what you want. You want a situation like the one they have here to really only rely on your best relievers and to potentially use your ace twice, even though he had to pitch in the wild card round.
Yeah, it is good for them to be able to set their rotation, and because you can get Cole in without Reagans,
Mm-hmm.
So then you kind of be like, and I would take in a park neutral context, I would take the Yankees rotation over the Royals one. Even as strong as the Royals one was this year, I think that when you start lining them up and start talking about these pitchers, I'm taking the guys the Yankees have, but it even gets even better when you start talking about, I can throw Cole against whatever. It's not. I can throw my Garrett Cole against not Cole Reagans, and then I can throw maybe Rodon against Cole Reagans when he comes. Do we have word yet on when Reagans is going to pitch?
I mean, I assume it's game 2 because he'll be on regular rest by then, as long as the cramps, the issue that knocked him out of that wild card game a little early against the Orioles.
I like Cole Reagans. To be clear, I like Cole Reagans over Rodon, but that could be a tight game. That could be a 1-1 game sort of situation, because Rodon is pretty dang good. I think he's underrated, and the Royals lineup is the worst in the postseason right now. So that combination says, oh, well, maybe they get one run. And then you have Cole Reagans against a really good lineup, but that might be one run. You get it to the end, and you just have a Soto walk-off or something. You know what I mean? Like a Judge walk-off. So I would say it's kind of flip them in that one because of the lineups, not necessarily because of the pitchers. And then, I think I would take who am I thinking of as the third Yankee starter?
I mean, Clark Schmidt is back from the IL. I think you'd line him up as your third or Heel. It's either Schmidt or Heel.
I think it's both.
You think they just work in tandem?
Yeah, because we're looking at you're looking at a series that has some rest days in it.
Yeah, it does. It does give you some different options.
You could bring Cole back.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I would use both Heel and Schmidt, and they're very different pitchers. Power north-south guy, and then like a little bit more of an east-west guy in Clark Schmidt. So I think that would be a little bit rough on lineup making and matchup making. So I would use them both. Neither one of them has a ton of innings left, and the little bit of fatigue concerns and stuff like that. So yeah, I think that'd be a pretty exciting duo for me. I'd take that over something like. Lugo, I mean, would I take that over Lugo? No, I guess I'd take Lugo over that.
Right, because that'd be your likely Game 3 matchup. The one time we'll see Lugo as a starter.
In the lineups. Once you factor in the lineups, I think I still take like Yankees lineup plus those two pitchers over Lugo in the other lineup. So I just don't. I can't see the Royals as a favorite in any game. Once I think about all the different parts.
I mean, I think the relative weakness for me of this Yankees team is that the bullpen is good, not great. Mm-hmm. That's probably the spot where...
But I'm a big Luke Weaver fan.
Yeah, I mean, Luke Weaver's great. I just think it's the bridge to him that it's just a little more vulnerable than some of the other bullpens in this postseason. So if you're going to say, like, what's causing Yankees fans to lose sleep in the next week?
It's Clay Holmes, but I think they've
6, 7, and 8. Those innings could be the trouble spots.
It's too much. I mean, come on. You like in your heart of hearts, you don't think Clay Holmes is better than John Schreiber?
Oh, he's definitely better than John Schreiber.
Or Carlos Hernandez?
He's definitely better than Carlos Hernandez, no matter how good I want Carlos Hernandez to be.
I know, exactly. We wanted him to be good.
We want him to be so good.
I mean, Sam Long. I don't know. Like the Royals bullpen is one pitcher for me, and maybe Angel Zerpa will come out and shove again and make me feel stupid. But like, I think it's Lucas Erceg, and please get through this inning.
I just want to see if they end up pushing Erceg a little bit more because of all the off days built into the schedule.
Oh my
right?
God, 4 and 5 outs from Lucas.
You could say games 1, 2, 3, and 5. You could use him and not have to worry about having a game the next day. So you could maybe go 2 innings on any or some combination of those games. That helps a little bit. If Hunter Harvey were healthy too, that would actually help. And I think the Yankees are just flat out better. Is it a sweep or do the Royals get a win or two?
Royals will get a win or two when they keep the Yankees offense, completely stifled and win 1-0 or 2-0. I just can't imagine that happens over and over again.
So
if it does, that's how they win. If they win this series, they score 8 runs and win 3 games.
Or is it like a Michael Wacha mysteriously great start? I mean, Wacha's put together 3 pretty nice years with 3 different home parks between the Red Sox, the Padres, and the Royals. I know 2 of those 3 environments.
Yeah, I mean, it would be their pitchers
friendly.
shoving. They'd be winning games 3-1 and 2-0. And
he's kept the ball in the park better, but home parks maybe been a factor in some of that. Going into Yankee Stadium in game 1 is a pretty tough assignment. I know Brady Singer's had a really nice year. The thing that kind of caught my eye looking more closely at Singer, you mentioned home road splits. His road ERA is over 4. Lefties against Singer are the major problem, right? Whenever we see Brady Singer pitch in this series, the lefties are the biggest trouble spots by far. They hit 291, 367, 488 against him this season. So that's the thing that makes me nervous on the Royals side.
Do stuff like he just walks them for the most part.
Yeah,
and he just tries to avoid the heart of the zone as much as possible and doesn't give in and tries to walk them, and they still slug like that against him. So the other thing that is maybe a little surprising, given that these are all veterans, but every pitcher in the rotation for the Royals is about 30 innings or more over their career high.
Yeah. So I wonder if that's more of a problem in October or if that becomes more of a problem in 2025.
Yeah. Yeah. Fatigue is one of those things that you never know when it comes to get you. It does come to get you usually at some point, but it doesn't always happen in the moment. Sometimes it's, they're all slow in spring. Remember Zach Gallen when he came this spring, and he eventually got it going, but he was down big in velo in this spring after all those innings.
Yeah, it did take a little time for Gallen to get it rolling this year. All right, so we're both on the Yankees. We do think the Royals can avoid a sweep. The series that is probably the late game every night, so long as it's running, is Padres-Dodgers. Being on the West Coast fits well in prime time anyway. What are some of the keys in this series? We did learn that Dylan Cease will start game 1. And it looks like Yu Darvish is lined up for game 2. We were just kind of wondering, hey, he didn't pitch in the wild card round. Is Dylan Cease okay? By all accounts, Dylan Cease is in fact okay. We've talked about the Padres having
a gambit.
Quite the gambit. We've talked about the Padres, though, being so dangerous because they don't strike out. 17.6% K rate as a team. A lot of that gets a boost from Luis Arias, but it's more than Arias as far as limiting swing and miss, and then also being a top 5 offense by WRC+. Great pitching, top to bottom. The Joe Musgrove injury is a concern, but I don't think it's not a backbreaker for them. I mean, you could go Cease, Darvish, King in the first 3 games of the series. That's a great trio. And same kind of question we've kind of asked each series is like, well, with the Dodgers, how do you line up the pitching matchups on the other side, and how do you think, like, how do you favor the pitching matchups one direction or the other? Because it looks like it's Yamamoto and Flaherty in 1 and 2. So
yeah,
Cease versus Yamamoto.
Yamamoto early, so he can maybe pitch again in the series, even on the extra day of rest. So that's a pretty cool idea of theirs, because they're low on starting pitching. So getting the most out of Yamamoto is a good idea. So I like that. However, I don't know, it's controversial, but I still take Dylan Cease over Yamamoto.
I don't think it's controversial. I mean, I think some of it's the absence Yamamoto had late in the season. It was a long time off.
Into the games,
Yeah, that's fair.
Plus, Dylan Cease just has that like sort of dominant velo. He has that like John Smoltz package. You know what I mean? Where it's just like he's going to come out and throw country hardball. So I like that matchup for him. And then I'm also been a low man on Jack Flaherty, who has kept decent velo up over the course of this season and hasn't really seen too much of a dip, but has seen a dip. The last 2 starts he sat under 92 in the regular season. I don't know if he was just saving bullets, we're going to make it. Let me not worry too much about this. But again, I don't know if this is controversial, but I would take whoever the Padres throw in that second game over him.
All right, so you're taking Darvish over Jack Flaherty.
Yeah, and then I'm taking Michael King over Landon Knack.
We think
Walker
it's Knack.
Buehler.
Yeah, I mean, I think the more they talk about it, the more you seem to think they want to use Buehler in that spot.
Yeah, and if they go a traditional 4th starter for both, I think I might even take Waldron and a bullpen game over Knack. I love Knack. I like Knack. That's the closest one, and maybe I should take Knack. I like Knack. He has a surprising amount of ride for his arm slot. He has a really good slider. He can go 3 or 4 at least and put them in a good position. But like I said before, this Padres bullpen does not go 4 deep. It goes 6 deep. And so Brian Hoeing and Adrian Morejon are really important pitchers for them. They could just have Waldron as, in case of glass, in case of emergency, break glass, and not actually start him. They could start the game with Morejon. Oh, you started with a power lefty for 5 outs, 6 outs? Then you go to a funky righty right off the power lefty and get 6 outs? Oh, it's the 4th inning and you now you're getting into the meat of this bullpen. That's really great. Or you throw Waldron, because it didn't work out as well as you wanted, and Waldron eats up the rest of the innings and you get to game 5, So like, I guess I will take Knack over a bullpen game, I guess. But I mean, the Padres bullpen games are not going to be. I'd take Padres bullpen games over Tiger bullpen games, and the Tiger bullpen games, won them a series. So they're kind of underrated. So I easily take this Padres staff over the Dodgers staff in every phase of the game.
So the key difference, of course, is the Dodgers have the best lineup in baseball. So that's like the inside the matchups, like, okay, which side wins? Freddie Freeman has an ankle injury. We'll see if that's a limiting factor once we get to game one. He did some baseball activities on the field on Thursday. I think by all indications he's going to play in some capacity. It's just a matter of like if there's a limitation at all. But a 118 WRC plus for the Dodgers lineup during the regular season. Had a few injuries sprinkled in there as well. Ohtani just being ridiculous. Mookie Betts being impossible to pitch to. Tons of experience. We like to see that too. I mean, this should be an amazing series. I'm pretty confident it's going 5.
They played really well in the regular season. The Padres won 8 out of 13. But when you said earlier, I think you made a really great point that it's not just a rise with the strikeout rate. So I'm looking now at second half strikeout rates for qualified hitters for the Padres. Merrill, 16.5% strikeout rate. Manny Machado, 16.9. Jurickson Profar, 15.3. Luis Arias, 2. Remember there was a while where he hadn't struck out in the second half?
Yeah, it was fun.
Xander Bogaerts, 15.3. Jake Cronenworth, 18.8. All of them saved Jake Cronenworth better than 15% better than league average. Merrill, 59% better than league average. Machado, 42. And I don't even see Tatis on here, so let me throw Tatis on here. 26.9% K rate, so he's the guy who'll whiff, but he's also one of the best power threats and was 40% better than league average in the second half. So I think this is a team that can bang with them. I know I will take the Dodgers lineup. I'm not being willfully ignorant or faith casting anything, but this is not the Royals lineup. This is a lineup that goes all the way deep and has, I think, even beyond the guys that I just mentioned, some really interesting role players. David Peralta was a 30% better than league average batter in the second half. Donovan Solano was 20% better than league average. Solano and Peralta strike out around league average, but they don't strike out too much. And they put the ball in play, and they're, kind of a lefty-righty tandem. Those are pretty good pinch hitters or worst hitters in your lineup. I mean, like when we're talking about holes in the Tigers and Royals lineups, like these guys, Solano and Peralta are probably, what are we talking about now? 5, 6, 7th on the depth chart? 8th. They're the 8th best hitters collectively, in this lineup. So we're talking about 7 hitters that are really, really good. And then the 8th spot is a tandem that was 30% better than league average in the second half. Lefty-righty tandem. Like, that's a good lineup. The hole is Kyle Higashioka, who is the home run stroker, as I think the MLB can.
Is that what they called him?
Somebody did it on Twitter.
Yeah, I don't think that. But, I mean, Higgy's shown power. Like, he's barreled the ball
I felt like
pretty
an old
consistently.
Man when I said that. Let me take that back.
I think that's one of those like kind of overlooked changes that the Padres moved on from Luis Campusano and let Higashioka be the main catcher. Like he's more dangerous than I probably gave him credit for in the last round. Just as I said, the relative weakness was the 8 and 9 spots. That's still true, but they're not. It's not Martin Maldonado. It's not that situation with the bat at the bottom of the order either. At least Solano is a big contact guy, and Higashioka can get to that power. The funny thing is, you just did this thing where you looked at the K rates in the second half of the Padres, and it's like, all right, everyone's great. Same thing's true for the Dodgers. Betts 12.4%, Freeman 16.4%, Tommy Edman 19.6%, Will Smith 21%, Max Muncy 21.4%, Ohtani 22.8%. It's a little higher, but look, the one guy that strikes out a ton, that's a really important part of that lineup, is Teoscar Hernandez, and he does a lot of damage. He's second in homers in the second half, right?
He's their Tatis, really.
Yeah. So I think the way these teams match up is really interesting. I do think the Padres have the pitching edge by health, by current depth. The Dodgers lineup being a little better could keep things really interesting. I think it's going 5 games. I'm going Padres. I know you've got them making a really deep run, but I think they're actually going to at least make it into the NLCS to play the Phillies.
We got to pick one upset. We haven't picked an upset yet. We're all chalker in this one.
That's what I picked originally. I'm sticking by the original picks.
Well, all chalk.
The only opportunity I had to switch was the Tigers. The Tigers eliminated the Astros. I thought the Astros were going to come in and beat the Guardians. So I guess if I had to take an upset, I'll just take the Tigers because I thought the Guardians were going to get bounced by the Astros.
There you go.
I get the first waffle. That's terrible. You're the king of
Well,
waffles.
I think the Tigers Guardians is the closest.
Yeah, I would agree with that. By a tail of the tape and the way it projects out, I think that's definitely the case. So, all right, fine. You've convinced me. I have to take the upset. Are we both taking it, or is it just me? Just me on the
I'm
limb?
taking Padres.
No, I mean on the Tigers series.
Oh, am I gonna go vibes?
Worked for you last time.
All right, I'm gonna pick Mets and Padres in my upsets.
All right. Get the Mets and Padres. There you go.
This one for the Mets is I've lost all the other things on the list. I had barely any other things on the list.
Yeah,
I'm picking Mets on vibes.
You had listed 3 reasons you liked the Mets in the last series, and you used vibes for 1 and 3.
Yeah, right.
You made a list like Buzz from Home Alone. It made absolutely no sense.
It's the same thing with the Phillies because they can actually hit, I guess, on the same level as the Phillies. So, I'm taking them on vibes, hitting, and vibes.
Vibes, hitting, and vibes. It's working. Or that they beat the Brewers, and every team that beats the Brewers in the playoffs goes to the World Series. Maybe that. Right. History, fate, the way the universe works. I don't know how to describe it. All I know is it's not great
Kodai
to be
Senga
on the wrong
as
side of it.
Reed.
Wow. I mean, even if they got like 4 really good innings in 2 games out of Senga, that could be the difference because it could be that close. We are on our way out the door as we go. A reminder, you can get a subscription to The Athletic. $2 a month gets in the door at theathletic.com/rates and barrels. You can join our Discord with the link in the show description, chat with other listeners throughout the rest of the postseason, and start getting ready for 2025 fantasy baseball, or just like join the void. I'm going to spend a lot of time in the void this weekend, I think, just
you need to
tweeting expletives
drop a bunch of U's in the middle of the word.
Steve Jazul, yes, he's like, use lots of U's. That's the advice in the Discord if you're very upset and enter into the void. But that's going to do it for this episode of Rates and Barrels. Enjoy the games this weekend. We're back with you on Monday.
Thanks for listening.